This is Dr. Marissa, you know me as the Asian Oprah, and today I'm delighted to have a very special guest. You saw him on my show, and we just had to continue on the conversation because his foundational truths are going to help us finally get to a place where people are real humankind. His name is Caldwell Williams. Please welcome him to my life. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, Caldwell.
The pleasure's mine.
Absolutely. Your grandparents were born slaves.
My mother's father was the firstborn son of the slave owner and one of his slaves. My first 10 years, we lived in the South.
Where?
Cass County, East Texas, near the Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas corner. They call it Piney Woods because pine trees grow like grass. The last published report of a lynching of a black man happened in that county in which I was born, Cass County in East Texas. A couple of white boys dragged a black man behind the pickup truck with his legs chained to the truck. So that gives you some indication of the culture of that community, even as we approached the 21st century. I was aware, because my family accepted and behaved accordingly, that the requirement, I was almost about to say the custom, but no, it was a requirement of a black person. If you met a white person in town, you stepped off the sidewalk and deferred.
When did you discover that you were part of a race that was not treated equally and well?
I cannot identify a point at which there was some aha moment, but it was ingrained in the culture and all of my experiences. The community to which I belonged was separate. Schools, church, household.
You went to school. I understand you were at UCLA, where I also taught, so yay Bruins.
Go Bruins.
Go Bruins. And you became a graduate who could not get a job from UCLA. I'm
Yes.
just summarizing
You're right.
some of the stuff we had in our interview.
With a degree in
And
business.
With a degree in business, and you could not get a job.
Could not get
Could
interviews.
not get any job, right? And you have this background where your grandfather was a slave, and then your father has scars on his back, and you have personally felt the kind of discrimination and prejudice personally.
I call it
tangentially,
exclusion.
Exclusion. And yet, when you were on my show, and this is why we're here, the thing that just blew my socks off, where every time I tried to get you to blame the white man or blame the whites or blame the race, nothing against whites, but putting people who were the active discriminator on the spot, every single time I tried to do it during the interview, you said, but, and you would say, they were also victims, they were also, and it was like, I remember after the interview saying to Farron, I just cannot get him to hate. I can't get him to blame. And so I need this man on camera again because you have in that approach or that BS, that belief system, I believe the answer to how this humanity of ours, this society of ours, is going to make the changes necessary. And that's why you're here. Why is it that you don't hate those who have done you wrong? Or why is it that you talk about not blaming when it comes to prejudice and racism?
In 88 years, you learn things, but I became aware of the difference in my life experience when I behave as though I can and I am responsible versus blaming and waiting for someone else to make my life better. And when I tested the efficacy of that notion, I produced more results. And I'm results oriented.
Yes.
I want to solve the problems.
So I want to repeat this so that we all get this, because I think this is a big nugget, that if all of us in America, in other countries in the world, if we moved from who's to blame for my unhappiness, who's to blame for my non-success, to what am I responsible for, and what do I need to do to change what I do not like or the circumstances that I am in. Is that what you're saying? That is the shift
Precisely.
that you learn. Yes. So nugget number one. If you want to change your life, if you want something different, quit blaming other people for the circumstance that you're in. And that teaching is so missing from many homes, from many schools, right? From many your friendships, because everybody's right there. Can you believe? And da 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 da, and it's all that way, right? It's not, oh, I messed up, right? It's the blame game.
When I meet whatever the circumstances, test the efficacy of my approach. What is this experience telling me about me? What's needed here? What's needed here in the micro? The macro and the micro. I mean, I can look. And when I look, I will always get ideas. As long as I look, the ideas will come. The salient point is take responsibility for looking rather than blaming. What's needed here? I think if there were 10 important questions in the world, this would be the first 8. What's needed here? What's needed here? What's needed here? And you will discover that your brain works as well as mine, and you will get ideas about what's needed here. And I have taught that concept to children as young as 6 years old in first grade, which is where my wife worked, and their parents, all the way to, and this says something about my perception of hierarchy, the 6 regional vice presidents of the Xerox Corporation, to the same effect. Hadn't thought of it that way before. And when I shared this concept in a high school with 16, 17, and 18-year-olds in 2023, these now 60-year-olds say it made a difference in my life, and I still live by that.
Let's move to veterans, because we are currently we don't have what's needed here. We don't have an answer to what's needed here. We have definitely become more and more aware of mental health suffering that is going on with veterans. You have a program that you actually help veterans. So how can we better serve those who have been serving us?
Heroin was as accessible as popcorn in Southeast Asia. And the terror of going into the jungle to kill, which is what you're trained to do, was relieved by being stoned on heroin.
Wow.
And so the leadership, the brass, looked the other way because it did not diminish their ability to kill. And these veterans, these black veterans with whom I was working, all acknowledged, yeah, I got addicted, and it made it easier for me to kill gooks. Remember, the enemy is objectified as not human. The current objectification is terrorists. And then it was gooks, and then it was Nazis. And, I'm a veteran. Part of the basic training, first orientation is you learn, they don't give you the language, you learn to objectify the other. And that makes it easy for you to become a killing machine. Unpredicted consequences of looking the other way. When young white commissioned officers who were the predominant leadership in the military in Vietnam offended you, it was easy to, when he wasn't looking, drop a grenade on him. And a new term was invented, fragging. Mostly white military leadership in Vietnam were being killed by their own troops, fragged by offended, young, unsophisticated, angry, vengeful military heroin addicts.
Wow, that is, I've never heard that.
What? Assiduously, the Department of Defense, we don't want the public to know about this.
Right, obviously.
We're losing control of our troops
Yeah,
by our own actions, by looking for
the other way.
the other way. Let me finish with these kids, these young men, or whatever they were. They didn't want to go back to South when he got out because it was still this Jim Crow. So they came to Los Angeles and Oakland, and they tried to stay in the West. How'd you survive? We hustled. Well, what does that mean? Petty criminals. That's all we know how to do. One by one, all of them ended up in California prisons, Folsom, San Quentin, wherever, where, in their condition, they were totally susceptible to Elijah Muhammad, who said to them, don't you get who your enemy is? It's the white man, it's the devil. So Elijah Muhammad objectified the white man. Totally believable to these young men. By any means necessary, you must take control. They all joined him, joined his gang, only to find disappointment because they learned that he was a con man. Virtually all of them had found something that was positive in their exposure to his version of Islam.
Right.
And so they had gravitated to conventional or legitimate Islam when I met them. Now, fast forward to the attack on the Capitol by white boys. Susceptible background to the conspiracy con. It's the deep state that's your enemy, that your government is your enemy. There is plentiful copies of tape of their president, Ronald Reagan, saying, government doesn't solve your problem. Government is your problem. And so these people who came from the hinterlands of America, but all suffering a similar experience, you articulated it very well, failure in life, personal frustration, totally susceptible to anybody who comes along and says, it's not your fault.
That blame thing.
It's your deep state government that's your fault. Or it's these people of color who are trying to come and take over your country. I'm going to give you your country back.
Well, that was Hitler's thing too.
Well, that's precisely it. And that has been around ever since there's been a nation.
Forever.
And so...
Okay, I'm getting it.
So the white boys marched on the Capitol. The black boys sell bean pies. And they're standing back to back. If they turn around and spoke to one another, they would see that they're doing exactly the same thing, blaming somebody else.
This is why. So
the answer is major first transition in life, the transition from elementary to middle school. The vast majority of children adjust reasonably successful to the surrogate mom, who's the one teacher, and 20 peers. It's more difficult in your household, except there are a few of us who come from households that big, right? But moving from that secure environment, 5 teachers, 5 moms, and 1,000 peers without the skills to navigate.
Elementary school to high school.
But the middle school is those middle years where you're not even in high school yet.
Right.
Terrified, susceptible to whoever will blow in your ear and say, I want you. Gang. So predators of all types, gangs, religion, crime, sexual. And therein, in that transition, is created the problem that the culture pays for the rest of their lives. Welfare, criminal justice, and
Drug addiction.
we keep paying and paying and paying without ever properly diagnosing the problem.
Right.
And so the problem doesn't get solved. We've identified 3 skill sets crucial to more self-reliant navigation of one's own life through this culture. And it needs to be taught when the children are accessible and available to learn, because those first elementary school years, they're like sponges. There's absorbing. Part of the transition, the way the evolution from childhood to adulthood, we go through our questioning phase. Why do we do this? Why? And the unsophisticated, unaware, and uneducated parent says, because I said so.
Yeah.
Now don't bother me.
Yeah.
And so, opportunity for the predator to step in. I've got your answers. Come join me. In the schools, with the children with whom we're some degree successful, are those experiences where the teacher must acknowledge your importance to me and my job. Driver's education teacher, band leaders, athletic coaches treat children differently than the conventional cognitive math, science, chemistry.
Interesting.
And what I found as a guidance counselor, I discovered sitting in the counseling office, typical science teacher. Okay, first day of school, first day of class. Let me tell you out front, 40% of you are going to fail. Band leader doesn't say that. Even the drama coach doesn't say that.
Objectification is a automatic occurrence if you do not teach someone to be aware of what is going on so that they can choose differently. So when you don't have a strong enough understanding or a strong enough mind to say, hey, wait a minute, you're telling me things that I don't really think that's true, that mind can actually have a defense against objectification. But the mind that has very little support, very little love, very little nurturing is fertile ground for someone with ill intention to come in and sway you or easily manipulate you into believing whatever they want. From the bully and the child or the cool gang on the playground, school ground, all the way up to government, Army, Navy, who objectifies the Vietnamese or the Korean people as gooks and people to be able to have them kill them. Like that sounded to me like the breadth of this thing called objectification that is just a natural occurrence when we have no defense against it.
Look back in history at kind of a little blip on the map, this ancient Greek idea of a democracy. Hell, let's try that as our rationale for putting our gig together. And because we have so much space and so few people, let's welcome everybody, no matter your tribe. This is aspirational. Nobody had published and talked about this before. What they didn't consider was imposing an idea of one person, one vote, of government of and by the people, inspiring idea. But what they didn't consider, and they still haven't considered, is it doesn't work to impose that aspirational idea on your old autocratic potentate system. Because in that system, the people are told, your king has all the answers. You just do what you're told. And that's where that is the culture from whence we all evolved. And that still resonates with our reptilian brain because it's been around the longest. Now, go to the Constitutional Convention. These New Englanders, who were the proponents of this democracy, this aspirational idea, came up against their brother, and I'm talking about Englishmen now, their brothers who owned slaves. And the brothers who owned slaves said, and then this isn't written in the history books, but I guarantee you this is what happened. Boys who owned slaves, no, we have more slaves than there are us. And we don't buy this democratic bullshit. And unpublished in our history books is the wink and nod from the New Englanders who said, okay, do your thing down there.
Interesting.
And the Southerners never, then nor now, talk about democracy. They talk about republic. Republic, the power is in the state. And this whole notion of one man, one vote, they got their Supreme Court to say, no, black folk are only 3/5 of a human. Objectified. They're objects. Yeah. And so the Northeasterners did a wink and nod. Okay, do your thing down there. Ivy League schools are all in the Northeast. They were all started by churches. There is no Ivy League school in the South because they didn't give a damn about education. They wanted to control their slaves.
Right.
And
okay, that makes sense.
And and so the development of this nation is the product of Northeastern effort, which simultaneously created and still promotes resentment, victimization of the people who experience themselves as excluded from this wonderful experiment. And they talk about it, if you listen, those elite, and then later those elite Hollywood, and the masses of middle America are as equally unachieving, resentful, and joined in when they got a guy, starting with Reagan, who said, your government is your problem. Reagan's first political speech after getting the nomination was in Philadelphia, Mississippi. The dog whistle, and the 3 civil rights workers had been murdered in Philadelphia, Mississippi. It didn't even have a traffic signal. But Reagan made his first speech there saying to them, I'm your boy. And the present insurrectionist movement sprang out of that because all over the nation, from middle America, et cetera, you're talking my language. And I mentioned to Farron at the beginning of the day, 2 days ago I had an epiphany because for years I'd been struck by Reagan saying, I didn't leave the Democrats left me. I didn't know what that meant. I now know what the Ku Klux Klan was created in Indiana, Reagan's home state. Wow. every Midwestern state during Jim Crow in the South had sunset laws. Sunset laws meant if you were black, you had to be out of town by 6 o'clock. But the press and the media didn't cover that. Mm-hmm. Their sympathies were with their Southern brothers from the Midwest. Mm-hmm. And first Reagan, and then more explicitly, Trump tapped into that. Mm-hmm. And they are in terms of the total population, they are a dwindling proportion, which produces desperation, and we are now seeing
desperation and action.
Desperation and action, mm-hmm. marching on the Capitol and all that crazy stuff. Yeah. Whether the government will have the courage to prosecute its own laws.
What do we need here?
Yes.
That's the question.
The middle school.
Yeah.
Catch them
early.
Nip it in the bud.
What kind of skills do people need so they are not so susceptible to being co-opted into other people's objectification?
Skills for organized, systematic thinking and planning. Secondly, skills for empowering dialogue. Third skill set, skills for assertively managing change or transition. Rather than experiencing change or transition as a threat to my survival, rather than being victimized by change, what's needed here? So that you become a part of the equation rather than a victim. I find that strengthening these skill sets, we call them foundation skills, improves one's confidence and one's ability to navigate the culture with confidence, power, and dignity, mm-hmm. which is itself healing and rehabilitating to the individual. And we've tested the efficacy of these foundation skills K through 12.
So those skills are part of a curriculum that you actually wrote up because you knew that children who did not have these skills were going to be either prey to those who were stronger or the bully group or whatever group it was that wanted to co-opt you into their own purposes by getting you to objectify the enemy, whatever that group was. So having these skills, listening, the organizational planning, and the third one is I did pretty good. I got 2 out of 3 right away.
Yes,
so
right.
The third one is
assertively approaching change and transition, and not being a victim. Not passively.
Got it.
You need to take the initiative. Change is happening to me. Mm-hmm. What's the opportunity for me?
Right.
Which is a shift in that frame of reference.
Right. So this curriculum you're actually teaching now. At
Yes.
88, you'll never retire. Right. You're just like me. So
well, I would say mm-hmm. my intention is to empty this brain into more vigorous, young, bright, ambitious people who can carry on the work. My days are numbered. I don't know how many, but my philosophy is time to hustle buns.
Which is why you're here.
Which is why I'm here. Children who hurt children are in pain themselves. And I would generalize that further. Any human who hurts another human is responding to their own pain.
Wow. Yeah, when you said that on the show, that went, like that was one of those moments of hurt people. And I'd heard it before, but it really didn't hit me. It didn't hurt my heart. I didn't that totally makes sense. And yet we turn on the bully.
Yes.
Turn on the hurter, right? Because they're evil.
Yeah, and so you simply reinforce what they already believe.
And you mentioned
I'm bad, and I deserve it.
what happened to George Floyd was horrible. Him dying at the foot of the policeman, and then you went, but nowhere has there been any understanding or effort to understand or have empathy that he also was maybe, hurt people maybe, but more so that he was doing his job
Yes.
the same way that a soldier that we started this conversation with does his job to kill the gooks in the war because they've been objectified. So black men have been objectified by the police as the bad ones.
And so the policeman who vows to protect and serve, externally we don't recognize that his picture of whom he's serving are his white neighbors.
He's not conscious of that.
Oh,
Fully conscious.
I think he's conscious of whom he's serving. And what his white neighbors and he have learned from birth is that these objects are the threats to us. And so if you listen to what happened in the steps leading up to Floyd's death, he was never do well trying to pass a counterfeit $20 bill, and he deserves whatever he gets. And we're going to keep this community under control so they don't come bringing their problems over to our community. And so the policeman was doing his job as he proceeded.
Yes, Black Lives Matter, and yes, we need to end racism, and yes, prejudice is wrong, and yes, black and brown people have had less opportunities, less privilege, and then we have the backlash from, well, everybody's been discriminated at some point, and what about the Native Americans, and, there's, not all whites have had privilege, and that whole thing has then been tied to, well, what a defunding of the police, and let's not, no more money to the police because they're using it to discriminate and show prejudice. And then there's no, Blue Lives Matter because they are just as important, they're just doing their job, and, this is way gone over to the other extreme. So, take a breath. Please help me untangle the tension and the mess that we are currently living through right now because of not what started with George Floyd. This started a long time ago. This started with the whole, I remember, when slavery was abolished, and I was told that the slave owners were compensated. The slaves weren't compensated. The slave owners were compensated for taking their slaves being taken away. So all of this has started long ago. But I have to admit, meeting you has changed my way of what is the solution. Before, I would say it is repatriation, admitting that wrong has been done, putting the things in place to rectify what the wrong in place. We've been doing that, and it hasn't exactly worked out the way we were hoping to. So help me with the, what do we need to do?
First response, I don't know, but I can tell you what my thoughts are. Okay. For as long as blacks have suffered in the United States, Irishmen suffered at the foot of Englishmen who controlled them for more than 100 years. And they were the same color. Okay? So
Go figure, right?
Okay. That relationship created sharecropping. Irish couldn't own the land, the Englishmen owned the land, so to survive, the Irishmen did the work, and the first fruits of the work went to the Englishmen. And that they brought that across the United States. So I'm saying a long history of this.
Before black and brown.
Yes. And in my lifetime, the truth not told about that, if you'll pardon the expression, and I'm certain there were others, but Irishmen were the first niggers
Whoa.
with the British.
Okay.
And they didn't, and the romanticized history refused to tell that story. There were signs in windows in the Northeast that said, Irish need not apply.
I do believe that this is the kind of honest dialogue that needs to happen. Otherwise, we continue to romanticize
Yes.
what is going on.
Yes, and so that part of the story doesn't get told. And so the implication of the silence is, see, we solved the problem. We solved our problem in my lifetime. So the evolutionary parade, first the Irish broke the cycle, then the Polish broke the cycle, and now the blacks and browns are in the same process, and they get vilified. We get vilified.
Right.
Sports became the primary vehicle for that evolution. The University of Notre Dame, football, Irish Catholics. Irish because the Irish, poor marginalized Irish boys working in the steel mills of Pennsylvania and the coal mines, if you built up your body, you could get a scholarship to Notre Dame and play football and break the cycle for your family to get them out of the Irish ghetto. And so the Irish got known as the Fighting Irish.
Wow. Wow.
Followed by the Polish, now by the Negroes. And I have said publicly, if you follow the same pattern, the Irish would be, Notre Dame would be now known as the Fighting Negroes. And the whole world would explode in anger.
Right.
It's the same pattern. Yeah. So Hollywood handled it for the Italians. They started glamorizing the Italian mobsters, but the mobsters of 2023 are black and brown, and you want to close the border and incarcerate all the black boys.
Right.
Step one, tell the truth.
Quit romanticizing.
So we can begin a dialogue in search of solutions.
Right.
You can't solve what you haven't properly diagnosed. And I don't know what the solution will look like when it comes out of it, but I am thoroughly committed to dialogue that begins the exploration, and the dialogue must begin with telling the truth.
There's so many ways in which we truly need the principles that can help us out of our addictions to whatever it is, and we can truly meet my mission, which is to be happy 88% of the time. Caldwell, can you do this with me? Peace in.
Peace in.
Peace out.
Peace out.
World peace.
Peace.
Through inner peace.
Lovely.
Cheers, yeah.
Lovely.